Good evening, everyone. My name is Patrick Dunn, and I use predominantly he, him pronouns, and I am the Executive Director of the New Haven Pride Center. Thank you so much for joining us for the first of what will be many different panels throughout Pride Month. Happy Pride Month. And if you're watching this after the fact, then happy Pride Month to you, even though if it's not Pride Month. But we are so excited that you decided to join us today for our panel. Today's panel, which is titled Trans and Latino, Latina, Latine, is a conversation that will explore the intersectionality nature of being part of multiple minority groups and identities simultaneously. So we are super excited to welcome you to today's panel. Before I get started, I do really quickly want to do a land acknowledgement. The New Haven Pride Center was founded and operates on the traditional lands of the Mohegan, the Mashantucket Pequot, the Eastern Pequot, the Shattuck, the Golden Hill Pawcatuck, the Niantic, and the Quinnipiac peoples. We invite you from wherever you are to take a moment and honor the lands which you occupy. If you'd like to learn more about Native lands, please visit native-land.ca. With that, before I introduce our fabulous moderator, Ace, I also want to do a quick thank you to our incredible sponsors. The center's Latinx or Latine programming is sponsored by our friends at Circle Care Center down in Norwalk. And this panel today is additionally sponsored by CT Humanities, which underwrites all of our panels and conversations, and Anchor Health, which is a big supporter of all of our trans programming. And also want to give a big shout out to Finn Lockwood, who is our trans program curator, who often is the person doing this instead of me, but today I am doing it on their behalf. And so with that, I am going to pass it over to the fabulous Ace Ricker, who is our community impact manager here at the New Haven Pride Center. Take it away,
Hello,
Ace.
everyone. Thank you very much, Patrick. Hello, everyone. I'm excited to start this panel today. And first, I want to introduce, out of our three panelists, Eryca. We'll add Eryca on. Hi, Eryca. As well as Mia and Alejandro. I'm excited. I'm excited. Happy Pride. I know we're starting it off with a big excitement. And the first thing I would like to ask to really kind of start the conversation is possibly the different communities that you fall into within the conversation and what hurdles you faced when being part of the Latinx community and being part of the trans community. And any of you can start. Don't be nervous.
I don't mind starting. So, hi everyone. Again, my name is Eryca. So, some of the communities that I fall into, one, I'm a woman, trans woman. I'm also Black, and I'm also Latina. So those are some of the communities, that I belong to and that, I step into this space with. And then thinking about like those communities and identities that, are a part of me. Thinking about what those hurdles have looked like within the Latino, Latine community is, right, lots of like, transphobia, misogyny, sexism, right? There's many layers of one being a woman, but especially for me, right, being like a Caribbean woman, Puerto Riqueña, there's a lot of like stigmas and expectations and kind of like multiple layers that you kind of grow up with. So I grew up very much clear that I had to be a certain way, I had to speak a certain way, I had to dress a certain way. I had to maintain my mystery, but not too much. I couldn't be too forward, but too quiet. There was a certain level of perfectionism that it like kind of coexisted in my world, and that definitely has played a part, right, as developing as a grown adult, right, and sharing space with other people and friendships and relationships and in college and at work, right, you kind of you end up mirroring other people besides yourself. And some of those hurdles for me have looked like just kind of this identity crisis of like, well, who am I? If not, who the world has told me I had to be, right? And so when you add my trans identity to that, there's so much like confusion. There's so much like questioning and anger and other things. And so, yeah, it becomes really complicated. And yeah, it really contributes to how you show up in certain spaces, as I said, and has really been impactful. So there's been so much unlearning that I've had to do, so much practice of communication, but also like so much like kind of fighting, fighting for like myself, my life, my right to be here and to exist as is and not have to over explain that, because you can't like debate my humanity. It's not something that we can have a conversation about. And so again, being a part of like the Latino community, it's beautiful. It's beautiful. I love the cultura, food, the people, the sense of family. Just there's so many things to celebrate, and while two things can exist at once, right? There's also so much harm there, from ways that like elders have been conditioned to show up in a space a particular way, because they believe that certain things protect them, certain things will keep you safe, and as we all know, that's not true. Um, so that is what some of my hurdles have looked like.
Thank you.
That was just so beautiful. And this is why I love being in the Latinx community, is having strong Latinos, Latinas, and moving forward, and I can relate to Eryca so much because I was just the same way. I had to fight to be Mia Lozada. I didn't know if I had to wait years in my 50s or 60s to wait till my grandparents or my parents to pass away in order to live free as a woman, right? But what really triggered to be like, you know what? There's so much people that you can claim them as your chosen family. And I had the privilege and honor to actually have that chosen family because they've been there since day one and they're still connected in my life. And literally I had to fight my way at the end of the tunnel and be like, this is me. Because I don't want to talk negative about the LGBTQ or anything like that. But when I was in the gay community, I didn't feel welcome. I felt I had to fight. And what I mean by fighting, arguing, throwing shade, and it was like a war. And I'm just thinking to myself, wow, like why do we be or why are we in the same community, LGBTQ, if we're fighting instead of being together? Why are we dividing ourselves up? Like it just doesn't make any sense. So long story short, going into 2015, that's when I said, oh my God, this is me. I told my grandma, we were on the porch in this very same apartment. I said, Wela, perdóname, I'm sorry, but I already made an appointment with Katie Turney in Middletown, the woman that changed my life. And I said, I'm going to take hormones to transition into the butterfly that I'm supposed to be. And if you don't like it, I can pack my things up. You can keep the rest of my belongings and I'll sleep at Bushnell Park. I'll just literally survive because I just refuse to continue living my life day by day and not being able to live my true self by just not going for it. And that's why, like, being in the Latinx community and meeting all these other beautiful trans people and hearing their stories, the stories I'm going to hear from Eryca and Alejandro, this is the reason why I'm still alive. Like, you wake up every single day because you have a purpose, and people need to use that as a message. Like, you have a purpose. And being in the Latinx community, like going from the struggle to finally where I want to be, like having the family and the strong, Latino attitude, I'm just very grateful. So it was a struggle, like Eryca was saying. You got to fight for what you want, and once you get there, it's an ongoing fight. And so there's so much work to get done. So yeah.
Hello, my name is Alejandro. I go by he pronouns. I feel like I relate very much to these two beautiful ladies. Um, I often found myself in primarily white LGBT spaces, and I really can relate culturally. I grew up in a very small town in Connecticut for about 15 years. Population was about 25,000, and 79% of the population is white, according to the 2022 census. The bullying culture there is prevalent, and anyone who is different is a target. Some of the things I was made fun of for when I was identifying as female was I used to have very dark curly hair that went halfway down my back. My skin tone or anything they thought was, they're able to adapt. The cultural differences were often made a joke until someone thought an aspect is trendy and would appropriate it. And when I mean trendy, I mean it really made me upset living in a primarily white town. I see people with gelling their straight baby hairs or wearing hoop earrings and having these fake tans and having beautiful long nail art. Like, that's what I grew up with as a kid. And you called me all these names under the sun, saying it's unprofessional or it's ghetto or whatever you want to say, and that's okay. So this really made me question my identity and if or how do I embody appropriately. That's the one thing I face.
And thank you. And that's something that you've pressed upon. Growing up myself, being a trans man and being part of the Latino community, I actually was adopted, and my parents are white. Both are white in a very predominantly white community, and you would always see those levels of being ostracized because you were seen differently, and you didn't fit these stereotypes that they're like, oh, well, you must be always loud and you must always wear this type of clothing. And that brings me to my next question is, what were some of those stereotypes that you saw in the communities that you were around, and how were you able to overcome them? I know that I got some questions. You're like, yes, let's get into this.
I could share. So stereotypes within the Latino community specifically.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah.
I will say, right. So for me, very specifically, growing up, there was a lot of anti-Blackness that surrounded me, right, within the Latino community. And, that has looked like I was I was shamed very early on for a lot of my features, my nose, my curls when I were younger were a little much tighter. So there was very much a lot of negative language and treatment and just that was a lot of projection is what I'm trying to say. And so that made me feel very insecure within myself. And one of the ways to answer how I got over that was I'm very, very thankful for my mother, for her clear sense of my own identity and hers, and the ways that she affirmed me. Language is not what she had accessible, to be very clear. She wasn't out here and these are the intersection thing. That's not what was happening, right? But it was very much this is who you are. You are beautiful because of these things. This is what makes up you. This is what your robe might look like, blah, 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 right? So I was able to have a sense of love and care to kind of come home to when I felt like I was kind of being picked apart within, rather if it was my own family or within folks within the community itself. So those are some of the things that picked me apart. I definitely even watched my mother go through it because my mother is indigenous from Puerto Rico, right? And there's a lot of Afro roots within our family. And my mom is very very, very indigenous looking, and very careful with indigeneity and the ways that we pick out phenotypes, right? But it also speaks to a clear experience that my mother had, because my mother did not have an Anglo-white experience or a white passing experience. So there was things that I watched my mother go through growing up, and even my uncles who lived in the South, and dealt with a lot of physical assault. So anyways, there are just many things about my body, my features that were picked apart. And so now, looking back, it was kind of that sheltering love and sense of self that I found within my mother that really, I think, actually, and also seeing much more clearer depictions of people from my cultura in front of me, right? I was surrounded by people who represented me, like listening to the music, trying to find media, like movies and other things that I could find a sense of self in, that was representative of like what I grew up with, what I understood, what I know, is also, I think, how I found a sense of like comfort, and I think also a sense of strength. Yeah.
I feel like if I can make a general kind of statement, because I've had a lot of different stereotypes. Some of them I couldn't even believe they're asking me. I'm like, is this for real? But I think the idea of you not being able to have more than one identity really hurt me. It's like we're not all Latinx people, or Latino, Latinas aren't all Christian. They don't, that we don't all act a certain way. Like it was very off-putting to me, like because where I grew up, I think less than 2% were Hispanic. So I didn't have much. Besides my own family, I didn't have any other experiences within my community, and that was really difficult. And I have the opposite experience as Eryca, where my father was darker and my mom was very you would not know she's Puerto Rican. She has a lot of Spain genes. And there was definitely some different treatment because I do have younger siblings and we have a different father, and they are white passing and I'm not. So there's always that question, are you adopted? And it was like, why would you think I'm adopted? I belong in any family that loves and accepts me,
Wow. That just, see, that's the thing that, hearing these stories, like, it's important for us to educate people, but the stereotypes that continues that I live day by day, it's just, I would never forget this. Like when I started my journey and stuff, like people would ask me questions, what's down below from the chest, and what was your name before? And I'm like, my name is Mia. And they're like, no, your other name. And I'm like, why do you want to know? So the point is that people, like, it's just so sad, I just went through all that because literally what people, okay, I'm trying to find the words, it's just like, it's so hard, I think people in the Latino community assumes that when they see a person like me, or even before, and they know me, and once they put that lace front or any type of long hair, they think that that's a man. And I'm like, well, what questions you, or what assumes you to think that you see what you see, right? I always say to people, we're all human beings, right? And I told my grandparents, listen, I take my life seriously and I really want to be myself, right? And you got to thank God that I'm not one of those people that, unfortunately make bad choices. I'm doing things for my community, and, giving back as much as I can. But I just feel like the ongoing is that the stereotypes that deals in a old-fashioned household is that they don't know, unless they are in our shoes, the hell that we have to face every single day. That's a man, that's a woman, whatever. That's who gives a F. And unfortunately, I live on Park Street in Hartford. Y'all familiar with it? So like, that's something that I live day by day. And it's sad because it continues and it's literally right in my face. But I always I remind myself, like, I'm alive, like I have things to get done and just move forward. But the stereotypes is just like, you a man? And I'm like, wow, the audacity. It's like, there are so many women that comes in different shapes and sizes. Why would you ask me? Like, how dare you?
And that's, yeah, and these questions that are asked of us in the realm of us being trans, and then also within our culture having these very defined roles that we are supposed to take on and fulfill, in a sense that there is no options for us outside this platform that we have been given and what we should be doing. And the consistent strategies, like Mia was saying earlier, with that it's like a war. We have to combat against these stereotypes, walking into these rooms with people that are in our own community sometimes, to be like, well, it's not that, like, there's not a right and wrong. If I want to wear makeup today, I'm going to wear makeup today. If I don't want to wear makeup today, I'm not going to wear makeup today. If I want to be in slacks, I'm going to be in slacks. And however you decide you want to express yourself and pull those intersectionalities out day to day, week to week, hour by hour, we find these criticisms that we should not be getting from other individuals when it has no repercussions or no effect on any of these other individuals in the community. I'm wearing comfortable clothes. I'm going to wear comfortable clothes. You're not wearing the clothes I'm wearing. And it's very interesting to see and hear the stories that and examples you're saying, because it's unfortunate that these hardships have come up. And one thing to ask each of you to go into is kind of what strategies would you tell individuals who are within these intersectionalities, within these communities, within the trans community, the Latinx community, what are some strategies you found to best be able to navigate some of these hardships you've had to face?
I feel like having a good support group is everything. I don't have a big circle. My circle like this big. I got like 2 or 3 really good friends, and they really helped me through it, you know. But I personally, I don't really believe I overcame these hardships necessarily. I think there's always going to be this work in progress we have, as long as there's ignorant people in charge. And like, the more education our children receive on diverse cultures and ways of living, the more likely they're going to become an understanding and respectful adult. That's what I think.
Strategies. I think like that feels hard. For myself, I do agree with the sentiment from Alejandro around like not sure if I can say I overcame these things, right? I think I do believe there's a work in progress, and like healing is not linear, and like understanding that this is like a lifelong process is what I have been learning and actively trying to practice, right? So I think in terms of strategies, and I think it's important to find like what brings you comfort, because safety is such like a scary, like not scary, for a really sensitive thing to say, because safety looks so different for so many. Safety looks different for all of us. So if I'm going to like speak to folks, I can only speak to the folks that I represent within these intersectionalities, right? And there's folks within my intersectionalities that like I still hold a privilege within, right? I'm not a dark-skinned Afro-Latina, right? So that's also another layer to other things of other people's experiences. So I will say, I think whatever brings you comfort is important, right? Rather if it's like having your favorite drink, having your favorite food, trying to implement like small and gentle practices that bring you joy and also like kind of bring you back to yourself has been really impactful for me. And like what the folks in my like circle have like reminded me to do. You love writing, go write. You need space, take your space. I also think like, again, also what Alejandro said, like finding folks that you can fully be yourself with and feel seen by, but not everyone has access to that. But if you do find yourself in spaces where you feel like you have access to that, I think that is extremely crucial. I think like as much as capitalism tries to tell us that individualism is the way to go, that's not true. And it is okay to actually ask for help. And that is actually how you're going to move and how we're going to heal, is by learning that like we're allowed to be a little bit dependent on our community. And so like I think it's important to try and like find that. And I think because of a little bit more accessibility in our worlds, right? Like with phones and just being able to like look up what is accessible in your area. And I think not even a strategy, but like just a reminder to be gentle to yourself along the way. Because like it's gonna be really hard. Like there are gonna be like you might feel like you have more bad days than good ones. And so just giving yourself the grace to feel that and understand that you are absolutely entitled to have that day, I think has been like really transformative to my world and the ways of which like I communicate to myself. So I can only like offer that is try to communicate to yourself differently first, the best way that you can, and ask for help when you can't.
So for me, like, I just write a lot. Like, I know like some folks are not able to travel. Like, I was in their shoes. Like, I wasn't able to travel, but now that I'm able to just get out the house more often, I feel like just going to a park or go for a walk or just travel. I think that is really important to distract yourself with all the craziness that we live in. But in order to fix those craziness is educating people. I feel like the more you meet people, I'm not trying to say I'm an undercover cop or anything like that, but when someone says, yeah, this transgender issue with the person that was competing in swimming, right, and they're literally right in my face and they don't know that I'm trans. So that's another way where I'm like, oh, challenge. I love challenges. I mean, that's why I ran for state representative in my district, because I want to challenge and make change for the people that are like screaming out that they want to find new change. So like going back to that situation where someone says, oh, this transgender person with this swimming athlete, and I'm like, interesting, tell me more. I just feel like that moment is a good way to just like not punch him in the face, but just kind of like, bam, did you know I'm transgender? And that kind of continues to have a safe environment, but to say like, listen, I understand where you're coming from, but not all people are the same and stuff like that. So I just feel like traveling, meeting people, and just being safe at the same time is also helpful. And workshops, I mean, let's put a couple of bodies in one room, and I want to say, instead of calling them out, let's call them in the conversation, because how are we supposed to learn, right? So something like that would be very helpful in my opinion. And yeah, that's all I can think of.
And that I definitely like the call in instead of call out dynamic to that. And one thing that you talked about, Mia, is the dynamic of certain individuals when having conversation and they don't know you're trans. A lot of times when I do education pieces, I don't put in my bio that I'm trans, because I find that usually the conversation leads to like, well, I haven't met someone who's trans, or I don't know anyone who's trans, or they have this very stereotypical, very inaccurate depiction of what someone who is trans is. And to then bring about conversation in a very comforting, safe environment that really brings out like, well, why do you have these reserves to having safe spaces for everyone, including the trans community, including the Latin community, including all these minority communities and all these organizations and groups. And usually in the end of that, it's someone who has just met me or is trying to figure out certain things, and I'm like, but what if you know someone who's trans? Like, what if I could tell you know someone who's trans? And they're like, no, I don't think I've ever met anyone who's trans. I'm like, well, congratulations, you have, like, it's not, and like, we don't want to like punch them in the face, so to speak, as you were saying, but we want to really have them sit right there in that moment saying, you have this very misunderstood information that can cause all of us here on the panel and all these other individuals great hardship. And with this misinformation, this is a safe space, and to really rely on saying, hey, I'm not trying to come at you for your misinformation, but now think about knowing, me being open to you about being trans, what you are saying and what you are thinking and how that is affecting me. This person you're sharing a cup of coffee with, having a conversation with, maybe having a nice game, like board game at a game night somewhere, or playing a sport with you. Like, we had a great time, and you have such this negative connotation to this community that you don't even really know how to associate with. Yet I'm here, and we're having a cool time. We're playing games, we're talking, and to really break down those levels of ignorance. And like what all of you have been saying, with constant education, we want to constantly be bringing workshops and bringing information into schools and bringing information to our families. And I really kind of merging into our next question with like all of the different dynamics of like Alejandro talking about like having that circle, that tight circle of people you can just be confided in. And have like this shield ready. Like, I know I can go to so-and-so. And like Eryca talking about her mother, and like having that person that like says, you have your own canvas to paint whatever beautiful life you want. And that's your canvas to paint. I'm not painting it. I'm not telling you where you need to be, what you need to do, how you need to dress, who you need to love, or any of that. And like, yeah, talking about going into the communities and you and running for office and saying, I am another person in this community. I want to be as open and honest and supportive to all of you as I want you to be. And that's something I love these these groups. I'm so excited about panels and conversations, and bringing about that with the different intersectionalities that each of you bring and each of you have. How has it been navigating those intersectionalities, and have those intersectionalities ever butted heads, if that makes sense? Have you found yourself conflicted by being part of the trans community, but being within the Latinx community? Like for myself, especially with the language being very masculine or feminine, there's no divide there often. Has there ever been hurdles like that you have had to face?
Alejandro, were you gonna go?
No.
So I'm gonna respond to what you said, Ace, that will like flow into this question. I think in terms of, and I think it also supports like strategies too. But I think in regards to kind of educating folks, I think it would be really helpful to even go further and be clear that it makes sense in an educational standpoint if you are the person holding that space to do that labor, but it is not the labor of trans folks to do that all the time, because that also is can contribute to them being in very harmful positions and places. And also, I think it also is important for like these moments for allies to step up, right? Like there are many instances when I am misgendered, my friends will immediately be like, you be quiet, I got this, right? So I think being able to navigate when and where for folks who like, you know, who are maybe younger or trying to navigate like their own identities, like you don't have to be the savior, and like you don't have to be the person to lead that work, because it's exhausting. And if you choose to lead that work, like you also like that, I think it's even more important that you are supported and that you have access to like care around you, because you are leading so much work. I think that is a lesson that I learned, right? Like being a community organizer, I ran for state rep, like I'm an artist, and there's so many spaces that I've been that I was being everybody's teacher. And by the end of the conversation, I immediately like was done. Like I physically was tapped out. And so, yeah, I just think like all of us on this panel deserve as much love, care, and protection, and that like we have the ability to decide when and where we want to be the teachers, and it's also okay for us to be like, that is not my role. And so thinking about intersectionality, yeah, like I thought about that response with intersectionality because like how I show up for other folks around me, and it's important to mention it, right? Like I have friends who are dark skinned Latinos, dark skinned Black folks, right? And there are certain conversations that I'm like, no, it is my responsibility to show up for you right now and have this conversation, right? So just thinking about like how, it is towards me and also how that looks like when I show up in community for other people, because this is, it's important. And yeah, I don't think I've ever like bumped heads, but I definitely know that I have felt so much weight, just being like, wow, I hold so many identities within like, this beautiful body. And at every point I turn on my phone and like, there's another news outlet like telling me that this part of my identity is not good enough or this is this. And it's a very tiresome and it can feel gruesome at times. So yeah, I don't think I have butted heads, but like navigating them for me is very liberating. I think, right, having a clear sense of self on my own journey in the ways that I want to show up in spaces and have conversations with other people. Like I do so much of that work to be clear about who I am and who this person is when I step into the room. So that way I'm facilitating conversations that I actually feel equipped to hold. And so like, yeah, having a clear sense of identity has been helpful, but it's also been a journey, right? Because people, especially within the community, will tell you, well, this is not this, this is this. And having to unpack that for them and with them has been a lot. So I think in terms of my response earlier, how navigating it has looked a lot like patience, tender love and care, and also navigating when it's my time to lead a conversation and when it's not. And also reminding myself that all of my intersecting identities play a part and make up exactly who I am and my very like shared communal experience, but also my very individual and unique experience. So yeah, I would say that.
I completely agree with you, Eryca, on the fact that, you get so exhausting trying to educate other people. And it comes to a point where it's like you're just fried, you're done, and you really question whether or not you should explain something huge like what being transgender means, And I got to the point where for a long time where I told people, I'm not your encyclopedia, I'm not your Google, I'm sorry. I'm not willing to talk about my experiences with you. And sometimes I get upset with it, and it is what it is. But for a long time, I'm not saying there's a right or wrong way to kind of, I don't want to say deal with all these intersectionalities, because for me, a big one was like I'm Latino now, and I'm Jewish, and oh my gosh, I forgot my major identity. But those two are very kind of being trans, Latino, and Jewish is very different, because so for a long time, what I did was I didn't tell anyone I was trans until I knew I was comfortable with who I was and I felt safe and I felt comfortable in my own skin to talk to them about my experiences. And then same thing when it came to being Jewish. I stopped going to temple for a while because I don't like people looking at me. Went to different one, and then I talked to the rabbi, who's a religious person, and they were completely accepting of it. So I feel like it is totally okay to separate all these identities until you feel comfortable combining them all at once. So if it took me 5 years to do that. I've been transitioning for 5 years.
Yeah, so the only time that I butt heads or just butt is myself. And the reason why I say that, 2015, it's just I have so many questions, right? I annoy my own self, but I love myself, right? But I ask so much questions because, like I said in the beginning, if you don't ask questions, how are you going to inform yourself with the information you want to receive, right? So people are like, you sure you want to transition? You sure you want to go through the hormones? You sure you're going to get your top and bottom? And I'm like, yes, I'm sure. And second of all, at that point, in that moment, and telling my younger self, if I could go back and be like, girl, shut your mouth and stop listening to these other people. Because honestly, if I have listened to those other voices, I would have been in the same position I was 5 or 6 years ago, and unhappy and depressed and going on through the unnecessary stress. And I realized that a couple years ago, but I actually realized it once I graduated high school. And I always listen to like friends, and then going into, thinking about what I want to do. And they scared me, and it kind of pushed me away a little bit. But then I was like, why am I going to continue to listen to other people? Because if I don't listen to my own self, who's screaming, I'm never going to be happy. And I was sharing with y'all, I'm a Latina that loves to play PS4. Yes, I love to watch the New York Yankees. People think, damn, you're butch now. I'm like, what is it that, again, going through the stereotypes, what is it that I can't watch baseball? And yes, the men are beautiful on that team. Aaron Judge, 99, he's my boy. But I love to watch people play like baseball. It's my favorite sport. And then again, it's just like listening to those voices where I bud kind of on an everyday basis before, not now, because I got so tired of listening to them and like, who do you think you are? Like, you are who you are. I am what I am. Just let me live my life. I'll let you live yours. But you just got to understand that people are all different. And navigating that is just, you got to be, I hate to say it, everyone's different, but you got to be blunt, as much as it offends the person. And, that's a oops and an ouch moment. Okay, my bad. I shouldn't have been too aggressive, but in the Latino world, Latinx is like, mira, mamá, papá, whatever, like, dame decirte una cosita. A mí no me va a hablar así mismo because yo soy yo. And what I just said, I'm like, you're not about to tell me how to live my life because my life is my life, period. So, and I'm glad that, I stopped listening to those internal voices and outside voices, because again, if you don't go for your dream, if you don't listen to your heart or whatever your body is telling you, I'm sorry, you just, you're going to continue struggling. But again, day by day, little by little, there is always a brand new, like Annie says, tomorrow, cut the cobwebs and whatever. And so, yeah, I just said a lot. So
it's good. A lot needs to be said. And that's why we're happy to have these conversations. And looking at all these different intersections that we have, oftentimes we find ourselves not only, like Mia, you were saying, not only combating the dynamics of other individuals, like every day we are combated with what we need to wear, what we need to eat, how we need to act, who we need to, all these things. And then that's on top of who we internally are saying, like, well, how should I be acting? What should I be doing? And putting these questions out there. And it's so much, especially like Eryca, you were talking about, like, looking at the news. I have already specifically given myself the notion that I do not look at the news, if I can, until noon, because I don't want to be hyped up right out of bed and exhausted before the day starts. And it's so unfortunate that we have to do that. And that's why, like, I'm excited for Pride to really we're just ramping up. We're starting it off with this great conversation where we're out in the community and we're vocal, and we want to be vocal to make sure that we uplift other people's voices who have dealt with hardships like each of us have dealt with, and to really affirm and empower individuals, especially the younger individuals who are struggling now within this pandemic, and they have just started finding their identities and finding all the intersectionalities that they have and are expressing. And to go into one of our last questions and it's kind of like this corny question that we go into, but now, what would you say to your younger selves with the journeys that each of us have gone on? What are something that if you saw your younger self, you would say to them?
I would say no need to pick a culture. People are allowed to have multiple identities, and do not water yourself down or keep unpopular opinions to yourself for the comfort of your white peers.
Amen to that. I would say, going back to the moment I had, do we have to keep this PG-13? Because I would be like, bitch, shut the hell up and listen to your own damn self. Because I'm glad that, okay, I'm good. PG-13, all right. Be blunt. It's Pride Month, mama. Like, let me just say, I was trying to compose my little hood Latina in me. But like, girl, listen to your own voice. And I'm glad that I did that, because I looked at myself in the mirror, having to see my body and go through the challenges, and people are like, oh, if you go all the way, you're gonna be in a depression ball and this and I'm like, you know what, like, enough is enough. If I were to go back to tell my younger self, 21-year-old, 15, whatever that age may be, because I'm still 13, stop listening to what others think, and whether your Spanish isn't real, because people call me, I'm a fake Puerto Rican. That's why I kind of relate to you, Ace, because of the Spanish. Oh, are you Puerto Rican? I'm like, yes. Well, you're not a real Puerto Rican because you don't speak the same Spanish that I speak. And I'm like, then what do you speak? Alien? Because that's what I am. And so, I'm not a real Puerto Rican. I'm never be a really good actress, which, that's one of my dreams, is to become an actress and yada, yada. So what I'm trying to say is, stop listening to the negative and surround yourself with the positive. And I'm really glad that I did that, because I had to let go of people, and people are like, where you been at? And I'm like, been home, because I don't want to be in the bar every single freaking Friday just to like go home with someone who's not going to even love me for me, when I'm like, could be in my own house playing my PS4, period. But just listen to your heart.
I would say to my younger self, like, trust your intuition. You're always right. I would say, like, practice more patience. To just take your time. And I would say, when it comes to an outfit, póntelo, put it on. I didn't buy my first skirt. Well, actually, this is a safe space. I took my first skirt off the racks from like Macy's, and I was like in high school. I was like 15, and I remember I put my first skirt on, and it was so liberating. I was like scared, and then I took it home and I had it stuffed in my drawer for like 3 years. So, póntelo, coño, put it on, and like allow yourself to be as expressive as you want to be, because you're gonna like really surprise yourself along the way, and you're gonna meet amazing people who like remind you how beautiful life is, and so just be patient.
And that's great. And all of our younger selves are now in tears because we're ecstatic, and like those individuals who are our younger selves, in a sense, that are in these stores looking at the skirt that they're told they can't have, or the makeup or the comfort that is really there. And it just, these moments specifically of liberation, as you said, Eryca. These constant moments that each of us have to have in private, which we want to express to the world. Like we want to wear these clothes. There's no different. I want to wear this gorgeous dress, or I want to wear this great suit, or I want to be open about being Jewish, or being open about all these other intersections about who I am, and that I don't need to fulfill someone else's agenda. And that is something that I applaud all of you for being vocal about, for being open about, and being on here today to express those hurdles, and being able to express those hurdles, but also all of you knowing and being vocal. And Eryca, you definitely put it into practice that we don't need to always be the educators. The allies who are listening to this conversation, you need to be vocal and stand up for us sometimes. We don't need to be the ones that are always having this conversation. And if you're curious about where to go to these resources. You're starting with listening to this conversation. You can go to the New Haven Pride Center and get resources and books, and you can reach out to all these different individuals, and to individuals that each of you in most aspects are pretty much vocal in the community, and be like, hey, like, I'm ignorant. What do I need to do to uplift these amazing individuals? Not only during Pride Month, but every single month. Because right now we're getting into Pride Month and we're excited about that. But this is just to be even more vocal. Like, hey, we're here 12 months out of the year. It's not just June. And that we're having Pride Month because we are humans, just like every single one of you. And we're being vocal about it because we're not being respected the rest of this month. And I want to again thank all of you. I know that we're wrapping up this panel, but I'm ecstatic. I'm ecstatic. I hope to have more conversations with the three of you, as well as the conversations rippling out from this one, and to really bring about, like, this is a great time to really embrace each other. And whether you're an ally or you're part of the LGBTQ plus community, is to affirm everybody within those communities. And I really thank all of you. I think I'm going to bring Patrick back in just a little bit. But is there any last things that any of you wanted to say beforehand, before we close up?
I just want to say that thank you for doing this, because, you know, I mentor young trans babies right now to remind them that this is why I do this work, is to be vocal and to give them hope, because I think it's 42 or 46% that high school or transgender youth had committed suicide. So I think it's important to share that and to remind people, whether if you're in my community or not, treat everyone just how you want to be treated, you know. And I think that's really important, because doing this work is what's keeping me alive and wanting me to do, you know, more panels like this. So I just wanted to put that out. And thank you for all you fabulous people. I love y'all. Really an honor to be part of this panel tonight.
Yes, I agree. I think my last remarks would be that the world that we live in, specifically if we're, you know, trying to attack these conversations and identify like where they're coming from and how it's impacting us, you know, that capitalism and white supremacy and transphobia, all these other isms are working to decenter our humanities, right? When you decenter our humanities, that means people can treat us any kind of way. You become a tool. You become less of a person. And so I would just say to remind yourself and to align yourself in spaces where you are centered in your humanity, because that is, I think, how we're going to live and continue to live. And that you don't have to, like, you know, be organizing the most extravagant, you know, marches, or, you know, working and organizing or doing any of these things. That you being alive is radical within itself. You being joyous and present with yourself and your loved ones is radical within itself. And so, just to celebrate yourself in the honor that you actually already are and the divine that you actually already are. I think like that feels especially important when thinking about young people, young queer people, young trans folks. So yeah.
I would say for the people who think that riots don't do anything, if our first pride was a riot because a transgender Black woman threw the first brick. So we are here today because of her, our LGBT elders who fought really hard for us to be able to do this, and I'm so thankful.
And thank you all. And wrapping up, and I hope that all of us can be resources. This is definitely a resource. The New Haven Pride Center is a resource that we want to put out. And to end this off, I have a saying specifically saying that being you is beautiful and to constantly be you. So thank you every one of you for being here tonight. Back to you, Patrick.
I'm here. No, oh my God. I was like in the background being like, yes, the whole time. But no, thank you all for being here. And there's so much I think that we collectively as a community can take away from each of the points and many of the things that you all said. Alejandro, I'm gonna run with your "don't water yourself down" phrase, because I did that for so long. It's not even funny. And I so appreciate thinking about it through that idea of like watering yourself down to appease everybody else around you. So I just want to thank all of you for being here, for sharing your story and about yourselves. And in a way, I would say almost more importantly, for shining light on the experiences of trans Latino, Latina, or Latina individuals, because unfortunately in so many conversations, Latin identities are erased or very, very underplayed. And particularly in Connecticut, unfortunately, there's not enough conversations happening around issues that specifically affect Latin communities. So I'm just so thankful for all of you, for your time, your energy, and all that you do in our community that many of the folks watching may not even be aware of. So and to echo the center's board chair who is watching and said, thank you for the four of you for sharing your stories and kicking off Pride Month. And I'm going to echo and say, kicking off Pride Month in the right way, which is through thoughtful conversation, protest, and hard thinking, and not just parties, although we like parties. But with that said, I want to thank our everyone here again, and thank all of you who joined us and who are watching us from wherever you are, or watching us in a month, 10 years, whenever you're watching us on YouTube. But we are excited to continue to celebrate Pride Month thoughtfully and through fun, and look forward to seeing you all very soon.